I'm making a sound booth for my wife. She's taking vocal lessons from Voices for All and needs a sound booth, and she needs it quick. And here in Minnesota, we work in the garage in the wintertime where it's nice and cold. And so we're going to get started here on this build. When approaching this build, there were a number of considerations. This needed to fit in the house, which is pretty important. And it needed to go upstairs, around corners, and into an extra bedroom, which was rather small, 10 by 12. And so this booth needed to fit in there and also accommodate the furniture, which is going to stay in there also, and a place for a computer, which will be outside of the booth, because having it outside the booth means its fan noise is not going to get inside the booth. We'll also have a quiet keyboard. We'll have a workstation, which will be running Audacity and the script. And we'll simply be doing recording right onto the computer. I researched sound absorbing material, and there are all sorts of different ways to do it. There are foam pyramids, foam spikes, foam ridges, all sorts of things that you get in one by one blocks of foam. And in my research, it seems to me that much of the foam is fairly ineffective. Its sound absorbing capability is limited, and the amount that it actually reflects sound around, and part of what you want to do is break that sound up so it doesn't go cascading everywhere. So you put foam up, and the little ridges help to break it up. Unfortunately, what I was reading is the foam that's inexpensive out there is also not fire rated. And so the stuff burns and melts, leaving all sorts of nasty little toxic fumes running around your house, not to mention burning the place down maybe a little quicker. So I went with something different. People do talk about rock wool, which it normally is a building material. It's made from rocks and other things. The other things are also toxic and no fun. And people will use fiberglass insulation that you would normally use in a house. There are issues with all of those. I chose instead to go with a radical concept, and that is using wool, actual wool from actual real sheep. And the wool turns out to have an NRC, which is a measure of the sound absorption of 90, or 0.90 to be correct, where 1 is your maximum sound absorption, or at least the index for it. 90 turns out to be pretty darn good. And it was about as expensive as the cheap foam. Now, there is better foam. Companies like Auralex and a few others make high-end foam that is fire resistant and absorbs sound very well. But in this case, I wasn't going to throw down $1,000 for foam. So for this build, we needed 4 panels to put 4 walls on this, with a little door that we'll put on later. And the 4 panels are there to absorb sound. And I've made 2 panels, as you see here, using masonite as the backing. Those 2 panels will go up against the existing walls in the room, and I'll have little felt pads on the back so that they're not rattling up against the wall. 2 of the panels are freestanding, or at least not near walls, and I've made those with MDF as the backing, in this case 1/2 inch. If I was younger and could carry 3/4 inch, I would use 3/4 inch, but I'm not, and so I didn't. And so we use the MDF on those, and MDF is very solid, very dense. That's a great material to use in order to deaden outside sounds, and especially bass. And inside, this is corner bead, regular stuff you use for drywall. It's cheap. You can get tons of it. It's always at the lumber stores. So I grabbed that. I cut it into sections a little bit longer than what I needed. That allowed me then to fold over the ends and blast them with a brad nailer, which is right over there, resting comfortably. My brad nailer is my best friend. It allowed me to put these panels together and put in these in record time. If I had to screw all of this together or nail it by hand, this would have taken me way more than the 1 day that it did to get all this measured out, cut, and assembled. And then a close-up here of the situation. Again, just hit that with a brad nailer. And this wool is not very heavy, And so I just stick the wool in here, and it comes in 16-inch bats. I've made 16-inch compartments, and it's not heavy. This is just to keep it all from sliding down to the bottom of the booth. I also plan to, at the edges here and in the middle here, put quarter round, which I'll then stretch fabric over and then down around the quarter round, so it looks nice and takes it just off the wool, and the wool also expands. So we've got about 1.5 inches here with the 2x2s, which for reasons unbeknownst to me are not 2x2. They're 1.5 by 1.5. Okay, so I'm going to give you a shot of the panels here, and we've got the first two of them up, and just to give you an idea of how it's going to work as we continue with the build. These are the two walls with the masonite backing that we put together. I use masonite because they're already going up against a couple of walls, so there should be plenty of mass behind them to absorb lower sound, and they were also quite a bit lighter. And we put all of these 16 inches apart so that the wool batting that we have, which is 16 inches, will fit in there without flopping down. And so I'll be attempting to do that today. I have an idea about how to solve the problem at this stage of it flopping out. I'm going to use some kite string stretched from top to bottom and just fit the batting behind it so they won't flop out. And then when we finally get our fabric, the fabric will aid tremendously in holding all of that in. So as you can see here, I have 3 of the walls up and a 4th one laying there because I really can't connect that until we get the fabric stretched over it. But give you an idea of what's going on here, added some of this string. And all I'm doing here is I'm tacking it up with a stapler at the top, tying it off. I will be doing that at this one. And then I'll weave it through the holes in the corner bead at an angle like this, so that it holds the batting in really well. So I'll just weave it through all those holes. Here's a box of the wool. This is 100 square feet. If I did my calculations right, I should come out okay, but we will see. And it's from this company, Havelock Wool. And as you see down there, there's a picture of a van, a minivan, and it says van life. Apparently, this stuff is used mostly in walls, but also in vans to soundproof them. And so that's kind of cool, and it also adds quite a bit of warmth because it is wool, and it has a little bit of an odor of wool, but it's not, there's certainly, you got to get up close to it to sniff it, so it's pretty good. People were talking about it having a smell, but I don't detect it, so unless I'm right up close. So anyway, that's the deal, and I'm just cutting it with a pair of scissors. Here's some of the cotton batting, and I'm holding in with the very fancy kite string, and again I've tacked it up top here, and then coming down just enough, going through different holes to try to spread out the string a little bit, hold it in a little bit better. I'm not trying to be fancy here in any way. And then what I do is I tie it here just to make sure it holds in that wool. And it seems to be working okay, kind of pooching out here and there, but once we get the fabric on, it may not be pretty, but it should be very functional. And then I'll continue with all the rest of these. But first, I'm going to go have a beer. Okay, so we have the wool batting up all around the booth. And starting to put some fabric on. And of course the difficult part was to figure out how to stretch this fabric. I originally intended to use quarter round to hold the fabric panels on, and also to give it a little bit of round contour on it, also to extend the fabric out a little bit by 3/4 of an inch or so, just to give the wool here, which is also sticking out a little bit, as much room as it needs in there. So tried that, and I'm not exactly sure if this is working, the solution here, to stretch this across and then pull this way. It doesn't look aesthetically like I want it, but again, this is a sound booth. We're not entertaining in here. The other thing is I'm discovering that the wool bats do come down, kind of tend to sink in spots where I'm using the MDF. So right here, this one's not too bad, but getting a little bit of droppage here. And so I am stapling it up. On the Masonite though, these are Masonite panels here, and they're sticking together pretty well. I can come back a little bit here so you can see, but they're not going. I think the rough texture of the back side of the Masonite is giving it enough friction to hold up. But anyway, on these here, this is an MDF back panel, I had to staple them at the top just to make sure they held on. And then up top here, I'm stapling this fabric on here along the top, making sure I have enough fabric to go. That was a fun trip to the fabric store because they didn't have cotton duck. This was probably a 50,000 foot warehouse full of fabric, no cotton duck. So this fabric does breathe and looks okay. Again, we're not entertaining it here. The panels will end up looking something like that. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm stapling up the fabric right now. I'll come back in later and figure out exactly where I'm going to put the trim to make it look a little bit better, and maybe, as in that case, to hold the fabric in over there at that point. This panel had to remain off for a bit because if that was on, I couldn't get the desk in there. So when I got the desk in, I was finally able to put this on. Because this is MDF here, and it's pretty heavy, I don't think it's going anywhere. Seems pretty solid. And so I screwed it in over here with one screw up top and one down the bottom, just deck screws. Oh, there it is. And countersunk those so you don't catch your clothes on them. Not that anybody's going to be walking over here, but what the heck. So we've got that. And then also, you might be able to see down here, the booth covers up an AC outlet. Right here at the edge. Couldn't be like another inch over or two. Also, very same thing's going on here, with it being just out of reach. So I've ordered from Amazon one of those flat rotating plugs, which should be able to fit in there and come out, and then I'll push this back up against the wall and bring it up here to the top of this thing, of the dresser, which will have the computer on it over here somewhere, and the wireless mouse and keyboard shouldn't be a problem. I'll just fish the monitor cables through the access port, and we'll be ready to go. We're looking at the sound booth here. I've gotten pretty far. I've gotten the fabric up and a little bit of molding to make it look nice and hold things in place. And we'll go over a few issues that I was able to solve. Up top here, actually, all that is just something to hold those two together. I do plan on putting something that looks nicer there. My wife is thinking leaving the top open because it's going to get very, very hot in there with all that wool. So for right now, that's just holding things together. Also, I've put this around this side here, but that'll be covered with some kind of molding to make it look good. Or it may end up being, as I'm thinking, the place where the hinges will be for a door that would then close over to here. And there it is offset enough, so I think the door would be flush. Once I put the door on, those two things will line up and it'll look a little nicer. Then inside, the fabric is up. It's not beautiful. I get a little lumpiness there. It looks worse on the camera than it looks in real life. And got that going. It's a little bit stretchy. It is a breathable fabric. Made sure of that. And then what I've done to cover things up is I've used molding. And I've got that also in the corners and also in the middle. And in the middle, I just went with 2/4 rounds and made a half round. Oop, here we go. And I tacked them up there with my other brand new best friend, which is my electric brad nailer. And boy, it just makes short work of everything. I just love this thing. I'm going to give it a hug. I love you, brad nailer. So there we go, our Mutual Admiration Society. In here, I moved the desk in, threw a lamp on there. Can't fit two, so that one's going some other place. This is an old Anthro card I had. The computer will not be in here. It's just a little USB port you can get to screw up underneath the deal here, so that's kind of cool. I may move it back so people don't crack off the USBs here by mistake. There is a pass-through behind this monitor. It's not pretty right now. I'll find a way to pretty that up, but there's a pass-through for cable to go out there, hook up to the computer, which will be outside the sound booth. And I'm hoping you can hear that inside the sound booth it's a little quieter. The two monitors will go on there. The microphone, which is a very nice Audio-Technica AT4050. Very nice large diaphragm mic with my special modification with a big red rubber band on it and a little angle XLR connector so that I can fit it on this little tiny desk stand. And we've got that and other such things. I'm using for the mic preamp, I'm using this Behringer Shark. The only reason is because I had one. This thing, really all I want is a mic preamp, but this is the smallest one I have laying around and I don't use these things for anything else. They're handy little devices. They've got delay, they've got compressors, they've got a number of other things in it, including an automatic feedback device. One problem with this thing is it gets so hot you can fry eggs on it. And so this is a temporary solution, and we are planning on getting a very nice mic preamp. More on that later. Out here, I ran into some issues because I put a hole down here first, figuring that's a great place to hide the wires down low and all of that. But then I realized this dresser, which has to go in here too, just happens to be 62 inches, and I've got like 61.5 inches from the door jamb to the booth. So I'm a little short. Luckily, I was able to get out a 2x4 and a sledgehammer and slam the thing over enough. It wasn't all the way up against the wall. So now I can just do it. The edge of the dresser is going to come right here to this spot. And I'm going to repaint these, I guess. And then the door should open just fine. I don't think that is going to hit the dresser. But anyway, all of that goes in there. So that was another problem to solve. So here we are at the end of this build, and thought I'd give you an idea of how things turned out, some things that may have changed in the calculations about what we were going to do, and how things actually turned out well when it was all done. You can see that we had a bed that we use once a year when somebody comes over, and we don't use it otherwise. So we flip that up. It cannot be minimized how much that helps to absorb sound in this room and also keep some of the sound from outside from getting inside. Like right now, there's a snowplow plowing our street, and you don't hear it all that much. Otherwise, also there's a closet here, and if you have a closet in your room, leave the closet open. All those clothes do a wonderful job of absorbing more sound. As we come back around here, everything seemed to fit together very tightly, but it fit. And the desk over here, I'm sorry, the dresser, this is the kids' old dresser, also fit, and I can close the door just fine. Here's proof, living proof. There we go. You can also see here there's a desktop computer and a laptop. We hook the desktop up and it's making all sorts of noise. It's just way too loud, even in the room on the other side of the wall. I'll be coming in and getting new fans for this that are much, much quieter. We'll see how that works out. There's an advantage to this in that you can have a solid state drive, which moves things very quickly around. In most cases, audio is not a big problem. Video, a little bit more. I like to use fast drives, but if I can use a solid state drive, I will, and the desktop has it. This laptop we are using right now because laptops don't make anywhere near as much noise as a desktop, but then you run into problems with enough ports. One thing to watch out for is that many new laptops have only a single audio port, if they have any ports. And the single audio port handles both a microphone and a speaker. The problem with that is the little adapter cables you can get do not always break these out like they ought to. Not really sure why. I think it's the departments at the computer companies that just want to make things difficult for people. So anyway, we've got that. The AC thing worked. The power for that goes down behind the dresser and then down into that deep dark abyss, which you can't really see, down to the plug where it plugs in. And that worked really well. It enabled me to get this right up against that. So again, these are the kind of things you want to watch out for when you design your system and take your measurements, that you've got enough room for it. Also, we have over here, I'll back up a bit, and you can see that we did not go with the door. I think my wife was very concerned about just really getting very hot in there. And so we use this blanket instead. And it doesn't look terribly bad. I can take it down for you. It's not beautiful, but it is functional. So there we have it. And that's okay. You know, again, we're not entertaining in there. And then we can go inside here. It's dark, so let me flip a light on. And we have a monitor. Some other things my wife has left laying around here. See that? And then over here, that instead of that Behringer Shark, we went with the Focusrite Scarlett Solo. Really awesome little device. It sounds really good. As you speak into the mic, you've got a gain control here, and around the gain control is a meter, basically. You can tell if you're getting into the yellow or the red. Rather clever. Mic plugs in right up front. There's phantom power, 48-volt phantom power, and a thing they call air, which I haven't read up much on, but I've tried it both ways. Air seems to be a little cleaner. I'm sure there's a good reason for that. There's also another gain pot, which is used for an instrument. It's a 1/4-inch connection on the back. The other nice thing is you can headphone monitor out of this, and through the USB, it will go ahead and return to you the playback through Audacity or whatever DAW you're using, playback through the headphones through this device. So you just need to hook, this is the place you hook your headphones up. You've got a nice clean monitor there to and a big knob to adjust when you need it. So things are pretty simple. You've got that, you've got the monitor, you've got wireless keyboard and mouse, so that you don't have to run all those wires through the fancy little access port, which needs to be fancied up a bit, and your microphone. That's our system. So now that this build is done, I thought it might be good to go back and take a look at what kinds of things I might do differently, and also talk a little bit about the process from here on out once your sound booth is built, and how then you deal with, in our case, Voices for All, and maybe whatever other purpose you have for a sound booth. I would say that the first thing is that I may have overthought this. I had all sorts of interesting plans for how I would do this, and I tend to get very detailed and write down all my measurements, really figure them out very precisely. I think about various solutions to problems. And then, of course, when you get into the build, sometimes you realize you overthought, and maybe the right thing to do is maybe simplify things. Luckily, in this case, because this is a functional thing and not an aesthetic thing, I could make those choices, and they're okay if they didn't turn out perfectly. Like you can kind of see right here, that's not so beautiful. But you know what? It works great. So no one's the wiser. We're not entertaining in here. There's not enough room, so I'm not worried about it. I would say one of the things that I did do was put the cord around over the fabric. Here's some right in the middle here. I put it over the fabric instead of stretching the fabric over the cord around to make the things look a little nicer. In this case, it worked just fine. It's holding it up. It's doing the job. Again, not beautiful. Maybe over time the creases will come out. I didn't feel like ironing them. But I think it looks just fine, and it's comfortable being in here. It doesn't feel like it's crummy. We decided not to put a door on here. We're using a blanket, which works rather well. Kind of surprised. And then we also didn't put any kind of roof on this thing. And I worried about this a little bit because the ceiling is going to be reflective. But it turns out that that wasn't a problem. So we're not going to put a roof on it now. And we're also not very worried because we have done the sound check that Voices for All does. And what you do in the sound check is after you've got your room set up, after you have all your fancy gear all set up and running, then you record something. And then at the end of that recording, you leave some blank space, 15, 20 seconds maybe of blank space. And so what Voices for All does is they'll do a sound check on this file that you send them. And this they do before they have you do your demo because they want your demo to be perfect. So what they're looking for is sound quality and room reflections, which is what all this stuff was about, to get rid of the room reflections, sound that bounces off of walls and ends up sounding like you're in an echo chamber. And also, they're looking for noise, what's called a noise floor. Basically, that's the amount of noise you really can't get rid of. For one reason or another, your house is making noises, and you could turn the heat off, which may work just fabulously in Arizona. In Minnesota in February, not so much. So they'll look for those things, and then they'll send back to you an evaluation of how your setup is working. And luckily, we passed on the first go round. And I'll tell you the reasons I think why. Yeah, we put some time into the sound booth itself to this thing, and that helps. But the other thing is getting a very high quality mic. If you're going to do voiceover, this is going to be your thing. You want to sound as good as you can. The one place where you should spend the most amount of money is your microphone. A quality microphone is on an okay audio system or an okay computer system is going to be way better than a crappy microphone on a fabulous computer system. I mean, a lot more. The microphone is the one place where, for the least amount of money, you can make the most amount of difference. Buy a quality mic. The mic we're using is an $800 mic. How serious are you about this? Do you really want to sound as good as you can sound? You may want to be looking in that range for an Audio Technica or a Neumann. If you can get a Neumann for that much, used microphones are okay too. It's worth looking for those. There are Rhodes. There are many other microphones you can get, and Voices for All, I'm sure, can help you with some suggestions on that. But get a high quality mic. Set it up right, just like they tell you. Your microphone, and get your your pop filter actually about an inch away from the microphone, and then you speak right into here. Get your mouth right up close. So now you're close to the mic. Closer to the mic, the more clear you're going to be. You can get too close because the closer you get, the more low frequency, the more bass you get. You'll see singers do this in concert. They'll be right up on top of that mic, and they're getting a nice big deep bass on there. If that's what you want, you can get as close as you feel like. But otherwise, this pop filter is a good way to remember how close you should be to the mic. There are also settings on this, and I don't know how well you can see that here because I can't see it. Anyway, there are settings on a lot of these mics that are used for allowing the microphone to be directional. So a cardioid pattern will pick up only what's in front of the mic, and then there's an omnidirectional pattern, will pick up everything all around it. And then another pattern sometimes is very sensitive both in front and back, but not so much to the sides. These things are handy. You'll also find switches on the microphones for a roll-off, meaning you can cut the bass out at a frequency below which you're going to be having any voice, so that if you pound on the desk, you're not going to get that transmitted through as much. The other thing is we're using a large diaphragm mic, which is usually a good idea in this situation. So a suggestion would be go to a Guitar Center or another professional place that supplies microphones to musicians and for sound reinforcement and for studios. And audition some microphones. Go in there and set up 8 or 10 mics and speak into them, make recordings of all of them, and go back and listen to them, see which one you sound the best on, and get that mic. Also, the sound professionals at these places are very, very good. They've been doing it for years. They know what's going on. They're very liable or likely to tell you when a mic sounds really good for your voice. So, just a suggestion on that. And then also, don't scrimp on the audio interface. That's the audio interface there. This is a Focusrite Scarlett. And again, that audio interface is very important. You want to get a good one. Focusrite is an excellent brand. You can buy all sorts of others. You can see the audio level going up there. You got a little meter on that. That's a nice feature of this. But this is very important because the quality of your analog to digital interface is very important, because after all, this is taking the analog mic signal from the microphone and it is turning it into digital. You want somebody who knows what they're doing. These guys are pretty good. There are many others. Tube preamps and other mic preamps can go for thousands of dollars. This was $100 and it's awesome. So I highly recommend it. And so that's important. Get a good quality unit. Also, we had a nice monitor and locating the computer outside. That's something we did that really worked well. Cut down on the noise, and the wireless keyboard and mouse mean you don't have to worry about cables on that. What else did we do? We covered up a furnace vent in the room. The furnace made tremendous amount of noise. I'll just have this peek out here for a minute. But down at the bottom of that, what's a box spring that we laid up against the wall, down at the bottom you see a little rug there. That rug is there over the furnace vent, and the box spring is holding that rug flat to the furnace vent. That really, really cut back our sound. And I think that also helped us pass the test. I would recommend for people who are considering making a sound booth that you consider going a little bit extra on it. The materials nowadays, with the shortages, materials are expensive. And you could, I think, on all of the wood and the rest of the gear in here, the wool, the fabric, and all that, it probably put $600 or $700 into materials at that point. And that's I know that's considerable, but if you can swing that, I'd highly recommend it. Again, if you really plan on being a professional and you're going to do this, just do this right from the get-go. And your Audacity will cost you nothing. That's free. And a computer doesn't really have to be the very best computer in the world if it's somewhat reasonably fast. If it's 5, 6, maybe even 10 years old, you're going to be able to run your audio on it, and it'll probably be fine. If you want a career in voiceover work, highly encourage you to visit Voices for All. I'll put the URL up here at the end of the video. Voices for All is a great place that really took a lot of time, and I could tell, having a background in the audio and video world for 45 years, I can tell these folks know what they're doing. So finally, I would suggest that if you are even the least bit handy, that you can do this yourself. You saw the materials I used. They were very simple, available at the local lumber store without a problem. If you also have the power tools, or if you don't, remember this: every new home improvement project means a new power tool. That is the rule. So go out and get yourself a brad nailer, and you will love it as much as I do. But get the tools and do it. It's not that hard. If you measure well, if you cut, measure twice, cut once, if you do that, you can do this.
Amelia Earhart dared to go where no one had gone before. The public adored the pioneering pilot, and newsreels of the day captured her every move. Yet the private side of Amelia would always remain an enigma. All those bathroom surfaces, all those different cleaners. New Mr. Muscle Multitask Bathroom not only cleans the usual stuff, it even cleans glass and mirrors to a sparkling streak-free shine. Mr. Muscle Multitask Bathroom loves the jobs you hate. Millions of pounds of good edible food are thrown away each year by New York City food businesses. At the same time, an estimated 1.5 million people are hungry, 1/3 of them children. City Harvest is the link between those who have so much and those who have too little. City Harvest is committed to feeding hungry people in New York City using a variety of innovative, practical, and cost-effective methods. Del Monte hand selects the best fruit at the precise moment of perfect ripeness and mouth-watering sweetness. Then each peach, grapefruit, mango, or papaya is sealed in a 24-ounce glass jar for display in your grocer's produce case. Whenever I use Pine Sol in my home, I'm brought back to visiting my grandmother as a little girl. She always kept her house smelling fresh. I have Pine Sol to thank for that. I always dream in color, but this time I wasn't asleep. I was in a place where the endings are always happy. From coast to coast to coast. Florida. In the heat of a single moment, you can live a lifetime. With a glimpse, you're transported to the ends of the earth, to the dawn of time. National Geographic Video. Undeniably collectible. If you want a real morale booster, have some fun with your hair color. I mean lighten a little, brighten a little. With Nice and Easy, you just shampoo it in. Nice and Easy. For your morale, for everybody's.